This is Ryan Kantor, a writer for TigerNet and Shaking the Southland, and in this video, we're previewing the Clemson baseball season for 2023. To help me do that, we have Matt Goldin. Matt Goldin is a writer and the lead writer for baseball for Shaking the Southland. He's also the host of the TigerNet podcast with David Hood. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Rod, thanks for having me back on. I'm excited to talk a little baseball tonight.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So, last season was interesting. It was definitely up and then down. They started 14-0. They swept South Carolina. Things were looking great, but then they lost to Northeastern, and that turned into a four-game losing streak. And the losses really kept piling on. After that 14-0 start, they finished 21-23 the rest of the year. They were 13-16 in ACC play. They did not make the NCAA tournament. It was a disappointing year. Obviously, it led to the dismissal of Monty Lee, the hiring of Erik Bakich from Michigan. So new staff this year, a lot to talk about there. But before we kind of turn the page, maybe just a little bit of what went wrong. If you look at the graphic here, um, they were okay at home runs, but pretty much the rest of the hitting was not great. The pitching was not great. Um, Lost both ACC tournament games and then didn't get invited to the NCAA tournament. So maybe just a little bit about where they're coming from, what went wrong last year, and then we'll turn and look at this coming season.
Yeah, last year, I mean, it was wild. I remember I was in Columbia for the middle game of the USC series at the minor league stadium down there, and blew out a USC team that we didn't really know much about at that time. But it was undefeated at the time. Everything felt great. You kind of wanted to start letting yourself think about maybe making that trip to Omaha, because it's been since 2010. It's been a long time, and it just fell apart really quick. I think a lot of it was those first 14 games were not against good competition. That South Carolina team didn't make the tournament, finished with a losing record. Indiana finished with a losing record. I think it was just, as we've seen in a lot of Clemson sports, sometimes a bad schedule can cover up a lot of flaws, and I think that's really what we saw with Clemson, and it kind of got exposed once we hit better competition.
Yeah, it sort of sets you up for failure. So let's look at the players. So for all that went wrong, they had the ACC Player of the Year in Max Wagner, 27 home runs, led the team in that, 76 RBI, led the team in RBI, hit 369. So really the team's best hitter for sure, and really their best player. He's gone. He was the 42nd pick of the MLB First Year Players Draft, went to the Baltimore Orioles. In addition to that, first baseman Briar Hawkins is gone. He had 43 RBI. It's a lot of pop to replace off a team that we were just saying had a fairly rough year. What upside does this lineup have without them? How do they replace all that pop?
Yeah, I don't know how you replace Max Wagner. I mean, he had probably one of the best individual seasons of any Clemson player in the past. If you look at the history of Clemson baseball players, I mean, I don't know how many had quite an individual year like he did. One thing I'm kind of thinking is, I don't know that you replace the pop. I don't know that you can replace the pop, but I also think that a lot of the issues under Monty Lee was, as we talked about here, the offense was very boomer bust. It was home runs or it was out, and I think that with Bakich, with him being a Jack Leggett disciple, you may see the return to some small balls, more manufactured runs.
Yeah, Monty Lee seemed to be more of the kind of MLB analytics, kind of true outcomes, home runs, walks, and I definitely get that sense from Bakich. They're a little bit more small ball, maybe not, bunting people to second all the time, but a little bit more of that. And kind of speaking to that, one guy that Coach Bakich has talked about how explosive he is and how fast he is, and we know he could steal bases. We've seen it on the football field how fast he is Will Taylor. So he'll get a chance. He only played a handful of games last year, just 13, but he did post an almost 400 on base percentage. What do we expect with finally a full, healthy baseball season, not even wearing a knee brace now? What do we expect from Will Taylor this year?
Oh, man, sky's the limit for him. I mean, this is a guy, if you remember correctly, could have been a first-round MLB draft pick had he not chosen to come play football and baseball at Clemson. It was, there was a couple of guys in that recruiting class that there was the draft buzz. He ended up not getting drafted in the first round because it was well known that he was coming to play college sports. He wanted to come to Clemson. So, yeah, I think that, the sky is the absolute limit. We got a taste of it last year, but I think he's absolutely going to be a huge factor. And talking about his speed, explosiveness, if Clemson is more of a small ball team, that's going to be useful. Having a guy that is quick is going to make a huge difference for this offense.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it certainly makes the sport more fun. I'm a big analytics guy just in terms of what I do for a career and what kind of how I analyze sports, but just objectively, it's more fun to watch doubles and singles with steals than just walks and home runs and strikeouts. So it'll certainly make for a more entertaining product. Let's look back here again, and now let's look at the bottom half. Let's look at the pitching. So pitching was maybe more bleak than the hitting even. Mac England led the team in both innings and strikeouts, and he's gone. And then Ricky Williams led the team in ERA, and he actually transferred to South Carolina. Now Ryan Amons was the closer, led the team with 8 saves. He's moving to the rotation. They feel he has a deep enough repertoire to handle that. Jeffrey Gilbert's also gone. He was a good guy who can come in and get a strikeout when you needed it. Where do they turn now for innings? What is the upside of the rotation?
Yeah, kind of funny you mentioned it that Ricky Williams made the transfer to South Carolina. There were about 2 or 3 players that made that transfer and are now being coached by Monty Lee as an assistant down there, which is always, I guess that's just part of the brave new world of college sports, is that guys are going to play on both sides of the rivalry. It'll be interesting to see, not if, but when Clemson has someone who's played on both sides. I think there was a women's basketball player that has done that. But yeah, going back to pitching, I think one guy I'm really interested in just seeing what he can do is Willie Weiss. He's a senior transfer from Michigan, coming in with Coach Bakich. There's about 3 transfers from Michigan that followed Bakich, and I'm really curious to see how those guys do. Michigan's been the premier team of the Big Ten, so these guys didn't come to sit the bench. So I absolutely think Willie Weiss can be a guy that comes in and makes an immediate impact and helps fill out some of that pitching staff that you lose.
Willie Weiss, that's a name to keep an eye on. Anyone else that we haven't talked about that you'd want to call out before we kind of broaden back out and talk about expectations?
We saw a lot last year from Jackson Lindley. I think he'll be another guy that's consistent, and Alec Oldenchuk is another guy I'm excited to watch work.
All right, let's kind of go big picture and talk about what not just what fans should hope for. Omaha's obviously on the back of the hats, but what's realistic? Last year they had a losing record in conference play. They missed the NCAA tournament. How quickly can they get back to where they want to be? Just on the screen here are the media predictions, or excuse me, the coaches' predictions or poll. You see Clemson 5th in the Atlantic Division, only 1 first place vote. So not a ton of confidence in the Tigers this year. What's your view on this?
You mentioned Omaha's on the hats, and I think as a fan base, we're all really hungry to get back to Omaha because we haven't been since 2010. We haven't been out of the first round of the NCAA tournament, I think, since 2010. There's been a lot of struggles in the postseason for a program that expects a lot. And I hope that fans can be reasonable this year because I think, hey, year one, going to Omaha probably is not what you're going to have happen in year one. I don't know many coaches that can come in day one, turn a program around completely. But so going in, I don't want that. But
absolutely.
I do think. Oh, go on.
This isn't a year 0 kind of rebuild, though, is it?
Oh no! I definitely don't think it's a year 0. I think last year, as we talked about, there was a lot of potential. We saw a lot of talent. The big issue, I think, is that the ACC is probably the second best league in college baseball. SEC is probably the best, and the Atlantic Division is tough. You've got good teams in Louisville, and I don't see this necessarily as this is them not having faith in Clemson. I just think that Florida State, Louisville, NC State, Wake Forest are all very good. And, being the fifth team in the Atlantic Division, I think doesn't necessarily preclude Clemson from making the postseason. I think the ACC is going to have a lot of bids. I would say expectations, you got to be happy making the postseason. I think that's where the expectation should be.
Do you think they can meet that expectation this year?
I think so. Yeah, I really think that's absolutely on the table.
I think that kind of progress would really obviously be a step in the right direction. I think it would be fun to watch and get Clemson fans excited about baseball again. I feel, going back to 2020 when the year got canceled, the team just really never got back to where you felt like they meant to be. Kind of lost some, not to say the program's lost luster, but just lost a little fan enthusiasm. And I think with the new coach coming in, it's really pep back up. And so an NCAA tournament year, right in his first year, I think would go a long way. There's a lot to look forward to, and I think that would be starting off his tenure at Clemson the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that 2020 year was really tough because that could have been Monty's Omaha team. That team had all the potential, but then again, we thought that about last year's team. You don't know what happens in a full season, but definitely tough to lose that season like that.
Yep, absolutely right. There's a lot of different teams and situations in sports where they sort of missed that was their window, and that window closed because of kind of external reasons. Maybe that's kind of the story of Monty Lee at Clemson, but now we turn the page to Erik Bakich, and the team's got a lot to look forward to, as do fans. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for giving us this preview. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, cool.